What is up, you guys? Let me just start out by saying how fortunate I am to be in a position to be able to give you guys exactly what I like about you and what I like about you. So you may have come across this video because you're shopping between the two, or maybe you just enjoy these style of motorcycles. So sit back, relax. I'm going to bring you guys the facts and why some people buy that one and some people buy that one. But in my opinion, they're both a win.
I feel you burn all over me. One hit of you is all I need. Baby, I need a fix. All I wanna do is let myself right next to you.
So first we got to talk about power, right? We have 208 horsepower here, 175 horsepower here. That's a huge discrepancy, especially when you're shopping and you're just looking at those peak numbers. But I can tell you right now, that doesn't make any difference whatsoever unless you are absolutely ringing that one out and ringing this one out. And I'll actually tell you why I might prefer the Aprilia in certain situations as opposed to the Ducati. Now, for those of you new to the channel, one, thank you guys for joining. Two, that's my bike. That is my friend's bike. I wish I was in a position to have both of these, but as of right now, I only own this one. So this is my perspective. I've ridden both, put quite a few miles on both, obviously put a lot more on the Ducati. So I have a little bit of knowledge about what these bikes can do. The Aprilia, on one hand, has a 1077cc 65-degree V4, but the Ducati has a 1103cc 90-degree V4. Now, they couldn't be further apart in characteristics, sound, etc. It's incredible how different these can be, even though they have the same engine layout. As you can see here, with the engine, it is a 90-degree angle, and that's what that 90-degree means in the 1103cc 90-degree V4. Now, it is a slightly larger displacement than the Aprilia's, which you can see, maybe, is more of a tighter V. That's a 65-degree, so they're a little closer together. Now, Ducati is also counter-rotating. I don't think that has much to do with the sound or really anything other than they did it to anti-wheelie. Basically, it spins reverse of what the wheels are to kind of counteract the front coming up, which, what's the fun in that? But that's the main reason they did that. This one kind of sounds like a lumpy V-twin at idle, and then all the way up basically till like 8,000 RPM. This one kind of sounds like a parallel twin, to be honest, till you get it up and singing above like 6,000 to 8,000 RPM. Now, I will say, I prefer the sound of this bike down low. I prefer the sound of this bike up top. So it's really hard to choose which one I prefer in the sound department, but I think the sound definitely has to go to the Aprilia. Even though this has the power numbers, you can ring it out, and that's kind of my favorite part. It makes all of its power up top. It makes peak power at 13,000 RPM. This one makes it at a little over 11,000. So, and I mean, they have different red lines. This one's 14.5. This one, I believe, is just shy of 12,000. But this thing feels like I'm on the limiter all the time, whereas this just keeps chasing that limit. You can just keep revving the thing. It's incredible. Torque figures, you have 89 pound-feet of torque, you have 90 pound-feet of torque. But if you look at the torque curves, I'll put up some dynographs right here of the Aprilia and the Ducati. You can clearly see Aprilia has a ton of torque down low compared to the Ducati, and that is very prevalent at low speeds and, you know, kind of putzing around town. I mean, this thing has just grunt for days compared to the Ducati. I'm not saying this doesn't have torque, it just doesn't have the same as what the Aprilia does. When you're ringing the bikes out, yes, the Ducati's faster, but 98 to 99% of the time, you guys are going to be dead even. You know, cornering, all of the above. These bikes are both extremely capable. And that brings me on to the next thing, is the handling. So, oddly enough, from my experience, these both have basically very similar seat height. They have very similar front rake, and the trail is very similar. However, the wheelbase is very different. The Aprilia has a 57.2-inch wheelbase, whereas the Ducati has a 58.6. So you're talking an inch, almost an inch and a half difference between the two, and you can honestly feel it. With this thing, whenever the nannies are turned off, it'll rip the front wheel up, no problem. This thing, you know, I talked about the counter-rotating crank. That's a thing as well. But this thing is much less prone to lifting that front wheel. And I see a lot of you guys that own this bike be like, how in the world are you wheeling this thing? Well, one, I put a different sprocket on the front of it. So that front sprocket going to a smaller one is like going up teeth on the back. Makes it way more wheelie happy. Two, I have my nannies turned all the way down, always running race mode pretty much. The thing lifts up like crazy. A lot of people are like, oh, winglets, those look cool, but they're not going to make a difference unless you are doing 150 plus, and even then I don't think they're really going to do too much. Handling wise, the Ducati I think is more capable. However, I feel more confident on the Aprilia, and I don't know if that's because it technically has fairings, it has a belly pan, you know. It's not, I don't know if I'd consider it a naked bike, but maybe that's why it's given me a false sense of confidence. But to me, mid-corner, this thing feels more planted than the Ducati does. Again, just my take on it. Take it with a grain of salt. I'm not as well-versed, never been to a track day, so again, listen to people that have experience in the comments below, because I can't really talk too much from that front, but that thing is definitely more confidence inspiring than this one. So another thing that I was kind of mentioning with the engines is the sound of them. You know, I said I like the way the Ducati idles, but I like the way the Aprilia screams up top. And you know, while a lot of that has to do with the type of engine they have, I do think the V4 is the best powertrain you can have in any motorcycle. I've had all the different types, triples, you know, inline fours, V2s, all that stuff. None of it compares to this, in my opinion. The V4 is the pinnacle, and I think that's why MotoGP uses it. It's just amazing. Gotta give it to the Aprilia. The thing sounds mean everywhere. Yeah, it sounds like a parallel twin down low sometimes, but you give it a quick snap of the throttle and the thing just lights up and wakes everybody in the neighborhood. It's awesome. Ducati, loud as hell. Don't get me wrong, it's just not to the same level of ridiculousness as the Aprilia is. To me, this is more MotoGP sounding up top, but man, is this thing just creamy smooth the whole way through the power band. That's one thing I would say for how they make their power as well. This is very much so at the red line. This thing throughout the power band, just power kind of everywhere. It's again amazing to see the difference between how they make their power, and Aprilia I think is more usable if you have to commute. I mean, hell, the thing has cruise control, but we'll get to that. Another thing would be looks, you know, and looks are subjective, I get it, and I see a lot of you actually on my previous videos saying, you know, you think Aprilia is the best looking, but I gotta disagree. I think the Ducati wins all day, every day. It is absolutely the best looking naked motorcycle that they make, in my opinion. Again, that's why I bought the thing. The Aprilia is still very good, especially this generation with the newer headlights, the revised front, but they kept everything else the same. I just cannot get over the running lights on these things. They look awesome. I will admit, on the 2025 Streetfighter, they have the headlight split, so it no longer goes the whole way across. I think that was a bad move. Makes it look like a whole bunch of other motorcycles now. This was very unique to this bike. I mean, every other one I saw was divided, you know, like that. So doing that I think is the wrong move. I think that looks absolutely sick. They should have stuck with it. I know they have to change stuff, but man, that thing just looks so good. I mean, so does that, but we joke all the time with my friend that just looks like the Volvo 18-wheeler, you know, the trucks. It looks just like their headlights. And I get with the newer ones, they're actually going to put the 1099cc in there, but they're not upping the power much. It's going to have 180 horsepower. So I'm curious on if that's a tune restriction, or maybe the internals are different like the MT10 has compared to the R1. I'm very curious to see what they do with that. And they painted the frame black. But really, Aprilia is not making like ginormous changes to this bike. Serviceability wise, the Ducati wins as well, because the Aprilia has a belly pan that you got to take off. It's kind of a pain to get to the oil, at least when you're trying to change it, whereas Ducati, there's nothing in your way. Also, the Ducati only has a single nut you take off to get the wheel off. Super simple. I'm not saying the Aprilia is hard. I'm really, you know, it's like every other bike. But this one is just, ever since I've had a single-sided swing arm, it's been awesome. I love the experience, especially adjusting the chain, not having to deal with the, you know, not being straight. It's awesome. The new one is not single-sided, and I think that's still a good move because it's, you know, more rigid and you can really optimize your track times. But for me, for looks, for ease of use, single-sided all the way. Another thing to really take into account for is price. So what you're, you know, the value that you're getting for your money. The Aprilia, on one hand, in 2021, this was $15,999, so $16,000. Whereas the Ducati, I believe, was around $19,000. So you're paying an extra $3,000 for the Ducati, but the Aprilia arguably has more features. So there is a give and take with that. You can, you know, go either way with it, but Aprilia technically has better value if that's what you're looking for. Usually when you're at this upper echelon of naked bikes, you kind of know what you want. Obviously, I wanted the big, bright, shiny, good-looking toy versus this, but this is absolutely a better value, especially now. I mean, I think the base V4 now is like 22,999 or whatever, so 23,000 for a base V4, and I think the new 1099cc version of this is going to be like 18,999. So I mean, that's like a $5,000 difference. That's a big difference for something that's going to be, again, very apples to apples. And then the Ducati, it just goes up from there. I mean, this is the base. You get the S, you get the SP, SP2, the Lamborghini edition. I mean, you go up to like $80,000 for this thing. The Aprilia, they have this, they have the factory. They might have other versions, like obscure ones, but those are the main two. And the factory just gives you suspension, to my knowledge. The Ducati, it's like suspension on the S, and then the SP and all that, you get dry clutch and what have you, and carbon bits and all that. It's just madness. To me, you get the same engine the whole way up the line. Stick with the base or the S. The S has cool suspension. That's very good, from what I've heard. Build quality is another one I wanted to bring up. On the Aprilia, I again can't speak too much for it. I can't see any glaring issues with it, but I do know that the Ducati was built extremely well. Like, the fit and finish of this thing is insane compared to my prior motorcycles. I mean, I've owned everything from Yamahas to Triumphs to all that stuff. None of them compared to how this thing's put together. And I would think the same for the Aprilia. Italian motorcycle manufacturers don't really mess around with fit and finish. May not be the most reliable things, but I don't think they mess around with how they look. That's for sure. And going into that, reliability-wise, honestly, badly enough, the Ducati motorcycles are now pretty darn reliable with this V4 drivetrain. Now, there is issue sometimes with the water pump. And what happens is, the water pump's on the other side, but I'm illustrating it. This V fills with fluid, and actually the water pump will start seeping and dripping down the bottom here. And it's due to I don't know if it's a gas, I think it's a gasket back in here. And basically it lets coolant or oil through, and then it just kind of seeps out. And really, they've revised it so many times and still haven't really fixed it. I think they might have on the 2025s, but I could be wrong. But other than that one issue, this thing has been extremely reliable. I put over 6,000 miles on it now. Kevin's, the day we got it, you guys can go back to the video, I'll link it right here, but it just shut off on him, and it said critical service needed or something like that, critical warning, and just shut off on him. Now, I will say, it was a simple fix. His lithium battery, I think, was on the fritz. He had to charge it up, and then it was fine. However, he has had certain cases where the thing doesn't start the first time. You have to shut it back off, turn it back on, and then it starts. So there might be electrical gremlins with this. Again, this is a one-case study, so I don't have much to go on, but from what I've heard, by and large, Ducati would be the technically more reliable Italian naked motorcycle in this case. I'd say one of the last things to go over would be the electronics package on both these bikes. They both have an insane amount of sensors, lean ABS, traction control, stability control, wheelie control, all of that different stuff that really any bike at this price level should have, theoretically. But I will say there's a few things the Ducati misses, and the Aprilia hits bang on. Now, the Aprilia has cruise control, so you can actually adjust your speed, not have to worry about keeping your right hand constantly on the throttle if you're cruising on the highway, just, not really doing much. Mine, however, does not have that luxury. So for some reason, when you paid $19,000 for this bike in 2021, they did not put cruise control on it. Another thing the Aprilia has that I will show for you here, pretty cool startup screen. I think the Be a Racer thing's a little ricey, but, there you go. It has a fuel gauge. So there's something I wish I had. And everybody says, oh, it's fine, you have this fuel light. Duh. I mean, you have a fuel light. That just comes on. You got to fill up. Okay, but I want to know how much gas I have. How hard is it for them to put that in? And to learn that they just made the 2025 Panigale without a gas gauge. Still, how hard is it? How hard is it to put that in? Like, come on. This bike's cheaper. Has a gas gauge, has cruise control. I think the newer one does have cruise control on the Ducati side, so I'll give them that. They added that. But a fuel gauge, come on. It can't be that hard. So electronics-wise, got to give it to the Aprilia. Has more features. Cruise control is awesome. If you've never tried it, you need to try it. I thought it was a fluke at first on a motorcycle. It is absolutely a game changer. Just to wrap up, I think these bikes are for the same but different people. So you have this all-out track monster, makes its power at the highest RPMs, absolute screamer. And then you have the well-behaved, amazing sounding V4 that just has cruise control. You can commute on it, no problem. This is really the comfort bike to have in this, scenario of two. However, yeah, of course, ideally this one, but to have the cruise control, to have the ability to kind of relax a little bit, really kind of caters to the commute to work crowd, or you're in town cruising around, very smooth throttle, very smooth engine characteristics. Whereas this thing, it can be a little lumpy down low. I did change the sprocket, so it did help with the down low performance, but it's not as smooth as this. I noticed that right away getting on this thing. I do want to know your guys' opinion in the comments below. Which bike would you guys choose? Would you choose the Aprilia, or would you choose the Ducati? And if you own them, tell me why you own either one. To me, this thing just looks absolutely amazing. Still wouldn't trade it for the world, but if I could add this as well, that would be ideal. There are other naked bikes out there that I would also add. I'd say the ZH2 would kind of compete with the Aprilia in terms of being a very practical commuter, but just absolutely ripping on the highway. The MT10 is also a very good competitor for this. Just ripping wheelies, sounding amazing, relatively cheap to maintain. You can get the SP version, which has the upgraded suspension, so it's basically a match for both of these. But to me, this one is the creme de la creme. I mean, it is the most premium naked motorcycle. BMW to me is just very sterile. That inline four powertrain without really any soul to it doesn't entice me to buy one. I like the ZH2 because it has the supercharger. The MD10, it has the crossplane 4, but BMW just kept it with the inline 4, and to me it's just very sterile and boring. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoy these bikes. It's very cold out. It's been raining and snowing, so I was just trying to bring you guys a video to where I can at least address a few things, and maybe some of you that are shopping around this winter can use this video as a reference. I know it's a, a small pool of, what I've ridden, but at least I can kind of give you pros, cons of both, and kind of letting you maybe test ride them and see what you think. As always, I hope you guys have an awesome day, and I'll catch you on the next one.